Let's dive into our explainer for today. We're looking at Jared Hoffman's book, What Happens When I Die? Now, this book tackles, one of the biggest questions imaginable, but it does it through a very specific and narrow lens, which is exactly what we're going to unpack together.
So, the book kicks off by asking what it claims is the most important question of all. Just think about it for a second. What would you say it is? Is it about finding happiness, maybe being successful, or just staying healthy? Honestly, there are a ton of possibilities.
But according to this book, all those other things we worry about every day, they're all secondary. The single most crucial question, the author argues, is the one that deals with eternity. What actually happens to our soul after we die?
And that idea right there leads us into the book's first major point. The argument is that we spend almost all our time and energy focused on temporary stuff, our careers, our plans for the weekend, our phones, while we totally neglect the one thing that, according to the book, is going to last forever, our eternal destiny.
The book really puts a huge amount of weight on our actions right now, saying that the choices we make today have permanent, unchangeable consequences for eternity. It's a pretty heavy concept for sure, and it really sets the stage for the rest of the book's entire argument.
Okay, so let's get into this next part, because the book goes right after a really common belief about the afterlife. That idea that as long as you're a pretty decent person, you'll be fine in the end.
The author asks this question point blank. Is just being a good person the ticket to heaven? It's a belief so many people hold, right? The idea that if your good deeds just kind of outweigh your bad ones, you're all set.
Well, the book's answer is a very blunt no. It argues that, based on the words of Jesus, the standard for good isn't just being decent, it's divine perfection. And that's a standard that, well, no human can ever meet on their own.
And this is the key piece of evidence the book uses for that point. In this passage, Jesus himself seems to push back on being called good, saying that only God is truly good. The author's takeaway is that human goodness and God's perfect goodness are just on two completely different levels. They're not even in the same league.
Now, to really grasp this argument, you have to understand the book's definition of sin. It's not just the big, obvious stuff. The book defines sin as anything that falls short of God's perfect standard. We're talking about things like a white lie or feelings of pride or jealousy. By that logic, the book concludes that absolutely no one can say they're good enough.
So how does the book even build this case? Well, it's very methodical. It establishes a super specific framework for all its evidence, narrowing its focus down to just one source of authority.
You see, the book bases pretty much all its arguments on what are called the red letter words. If you've ever seen a Bible where some words are printed in red, those are the direct quotes from Jesus. The author's logic is that if you're operating in a Christian worldview, these words are the ultimate authority.
And using that framework leads to a really stark, all-or-nothing choice. The book argues that since Jesus claimed to be the Son of God, you really only have two logical options. One, you believe him, which means you have to believe everything he said is true. Or two, you have to dismiss him as a liar. The author is very clear. There's no room for a middle ground, like saying he was just a good moral teacher.
So if you follow that all-or-nothing logic, the book then moves on to outline the two eternal destinies that it says Jesus himself described.
And drawing directly from those red-letter quotes, the book paints a very grim picture of hell. It's not described as just, lights out or ceasing to exist. It's presented as a state of conscious, unending suffering and, this is a key point, a place that's completely separated from heaven, with no way out.
Then, in total contrast, you have the description of heaven. It's presented as the absolute opposite of hell, a place defined by being in God's presence, where all the tears, sorrow, and pain are gone forever. The book emphasizes this promise of a new, glorious existence and an eternal inheritance of pure joy.
So, with these two very different destinies laid out as the only two options, the book then zooms in on what it claims is the one, single, exclusive path to heaven that Jesus talked about.
This quote right here is the absolute cornerstone of the book's argument on how to be saved. The author presents this as a totally unambiguous statement from Jesus, claiming to be the only way to God, which would, in this view, rule out any other religion or path.
And to really hammer this idea home, the book brings up another one of Jesus's metaphors, the two paths. It explains that the easy, popular path, the broad highway that most people are on, actually leads to destruction. Meanwhile, the path to eternal life is narrow, and only a few actually find it.
So how do you get on this narrow path? The book really centers on this idea of being born again. And it's very specific that this isn't some ritual or about doing good deeds. It's defined as a deep internal transformation, a kind of spiritual rebirth that happens because of a genuine heart-level trust in Jesus.
And all of this builds to the book's final point, which really shifts gears from explaining concepts to putting a direct, very personal choice right in front of you, the reader.
The whole core message of the book can be summed up with this image of a chasm. The argument is that there's this giant gap of sin that separates every person from God, and no amount of good works can build a bridge to get across it. According to the book, the only way to cross is by accepting the bridge that's already been provided, and that's through faith in Jesus.
After laying out all this evidence and making all these arguments, the author doesn't just neatly wrap it up. Instead, he flips the script and leaves the reader with one last, really challenging question to think about for themselves.
And this is it. This is the book's final challenge. Are you willing to bet your eternity on your current beliefs? It's a really provocative way to end, designed to make you stop and really evaluate your own answer to what the book calls life's single most important question.